I think it is very important to understand that the recent events, the recent crisis, is not primarily about the political contestation for power by two personalities in South Sudan. While this most certainly has been the triggering event, and it is sort of the central event that everyone is focusing on, what really matters is to understand that in this very young country, political institutions have not been capable of containing political contestation of power within the political realm, and instead this has careened off to a situation of violence. Also, capacity of these institutions, not only were these institutions weak in general, but also the capacity of the of people working in these institutions has also been uneven. As I said, South Sudan has gone through wrenching decades of civil war. It is critically important to somehow obtain closure for the people who have suffered. And let me be very, very clear. Almost every family in South Sudan has suffered directly or indirectly from decades of war. And the latest violence, of course, adds tremendously to this suffering. Reconciliation is important because right now society has a tendency to split along ethnic cleavages, and there is limited national identity. If you stop someone on the street and ask, who are you? They will say, I'm a Dinka, or I am a Nuer, I'm an Anuak, or a Shilluk. They will name their tribe. It will be very, very rare that someone says, hey, I'm South Sudanese. And that kind of identity needs to be built. You know how in South Africa it was President Mandela's one of his primary objectives to build a national identity for South Africa. In very similar ways, a number of other countries have done it successfully, and this is very much needed in South Sudan. So you have geographical lack of homogeneity in government and also in opposition. And these are all things that need to be considered, not only for the sake of a pure theoretical argument, but also because once you understand the nuances, the kind of solutions that can be proposed for a sustainable resolution of these issues are, of course, different. Compared to the analysis which says there is a single cause and that single cause needs to be addressed and everything will be wonderful from there. We have various projects. One is a South-South project whereby Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda have been providing mid-career civil servants from their countries, and UNDP has a project with Norwegian funding, which I gratefully acknowledge right now. We also had a very large project that had to do with capacity building, and that again relied on embedding experts from other countries in state ministries of finance, and they have been working on enhancing the ability of state ministries of finance to deliver public financial management. Unfortunately, the funding for that has been cut off, and we're hopeful that we might be able to allocate other funding, find other funding, but if not, then that will unfortunately have to be discontinued.
Why was the funding cut? Just because?
Because donors thought that this is too much of an uncertain environment. And while I fully agree that this is an uncertain environment, the risks associated with acting in an uncertain environment should be compared not with zero risk, which is not a realistic description of anything one can do in South Sudan, but it needs to be compared with the risks associated with completely disengaging. And if one manages the risks for actually continuing to engage, those risks can be contained at a reasonable level, and they most certainly will be lower than the risks associated with not engaging and allowing the system to play out along the lines of not receiving sufficient support for building capacity.